2021 gauntlet is officially done. We are in the reviewing stage to compile our top 10 list for the end of the year, but we can now officially say Happy New Year and welcome to Drive Home Reviews 2022. And what better way to start out a brand new year with new possibilities, new adventures, new thrills and excitement by reviewing the next chapter of a film series that first premiered back when I was a junior in high school. And the less we think about how long ago that was, the better. Yes, we return to Woodsboro, and we return to the seminal 90s slasher flick Scream with that annoying habit of modern films to just name the next thing the exact same title as the original to make things as confusing as possible. I had planned to do a Scream retrospective this year for This Is Halloween review, so almost a year from now. But I've been kind of planning that because I think 25 years on, we do need to kind of revisit some of these things and talk about the effect they had on the film industry, not just on their own genre. Scream, for those who weren't there, it's hard to really describe the impact of Scream and what it did, not just for its own genre, but for the 90s, the late 90s genre as a whole. You see around this time, because a lot of the people involved in the making of this film were responsible for a lot of the pop culture that began to pop up around that time. The original Scream was quintessential 90s, and it set off a tidal wave of trends that we're still feeling today. I was just bad-mouthing it a little bit when I reviewed The Matrix, talking about this tendency films now have, especially legacy movies, to hang lampshades on everything, draw your attention to it, and that somehow hides the fact that you're doing it or makes up for the fact that you're doing it. Well, that kind of started with Scream. That's where it began, the whole there are rules for surviving a scary movie. And giving it all in a nutshell, the original Scream, I feel, is a good movie. I still feel it's a good movie. It is dated as all fuck, but it is still a good movie. It was still very fresh, very original, and very interesting for that time. Again, if you weren't there, it's really hard to describe the impact that it had. And of course, its subsequent sequels all, they became what it was making fun of. It became just another horror franchise with countless sequels that just kept trying to live up to the bar, but just kept setting it lower. Screams 2 and 3 are fine. They're goofy films. They don't quite reach that pinnacle that the original came up with, because nothing could. You can't duplicate originality. Scream 4, so forgettable, I even actually forgot there was a Scream 4 for a while. And now this film, which is trying to capitalize like so many things are. So I think before we talk about this movie, we have to talk about what are the qualities of a Scream film. Because to understand how well this film stacks up, we have to understand what were the rules of a Scream movie. To sound cliche, but, what were the things that make a good Scream movie? Well, number one, it is that slightly meta humor. But I think going deeper than that, if you want to say maybe 1A, maybe, if you want to count this as a separate thing, it's not just a commentary on the horror genre. As the films went on, they began to comment on film as a whole. Sequels, trilogies, whatever the fuck number 4 was about, and now this one wants to talk about re-quals, I guess is now the term that we're using, or the term that they're hoping will become a standard bearer. So, commentary on the film industry as a whole. So that's a big thing. once again, I'm going to use that old tired cliche of hanging lampshades, but hanging lampshades and subverting expectations of the horror genre. The whole don't go in there, don't go anywhere alone, don't say I'll be right back, making sure that you point these out and then try to do something interesting with the cliche. I think that's where the first one really succeeded and where future ones kind of failed. But mostly, and this is what got me into the Scream camp, because I'm not a horror fan. I've said that so many times, but I like the Scream movies a lot. And what got me into the camp was that, on top of it all, another thing you have to have with a good Scream movie is an interesting mystery. Who is it? Who is the killer and why? Okay? So that's really, really important. Because that's what made me really interested in the first one, is trying to figure out who it was. So these are the elements that I think make up a good Scream, or rather the elements that a Scream movie needs to have, and to what level they are achieved kind of becomes the basis by which you can judge how good they are within their own franchise. Good example, Scream 2 did a lot of the subversion of expectations. It did a lot of the commentary on the film industry, this time the target being sequels. And yet where it fell down was in the murder mystery. It was a disappointing conclusion. It was not shocking or interesting in the way that the first one was. So there's a good example. So let's look at these things. Let's use these as the basis to discuss how well Scream 2022 fits into this legacy, and if it is, in fact, a decent movie. So, first off, let's just get to the story, which should not be a big mystery. So, once again, 25 years after the original, the Ghostface killer returns to Woodsboro, starts killing people. New group of young actors, drags the legacy characters back in, and secrets are revealed, things happen, blah 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 blah. I'm not sure how much I want to get into spoiler territory here. I'm definitely not going to tell you who the killers are, but I guess I'll spoil this. There is a little spoiler warning for a plot thread here, but it's revealed fairly early on, so I don't think it's too much of a spoiler warning, but still it's there. So our main character, Samantha, who is dragged back in to be the new Sidney Prescott, it turns out that she is the illegitimate daughter of Billy Loomis, Skeet Ulrich's character from the first one. That while he was dating Sid, he obviously cheated on her with someone else in high school, got her pregnant, and Samantha was the result of that. So now Samantha, who has been dealing with this trauma of being the daughter of a serial killer for all these years, is now kind of put as the centerpiece of the new cast and the main target of the new Ghostface. So that's the big thing there. So let's try to take these in order. So first off, how's it do in commentary on the film industry as a whole? And I think fairly well. Again, its target this time is not just the tendency towards, again, the term they used is re-quals, remakes, reboots that are also sequels. Again, things like The Matrix, things like Force Awakens, things that are trying to continue a franchise but also pay tribute to the past. I guess Spider-Man would probably be included in that list now. Ghostbusters Afterlife, there are a ton of these things. I've reviewed several of them already. But also what I think is interesting is it's also a commentary on toxic fandom. And, people becoming so obsessed with something that they become monsters. We see evidence of this all the time, especially in, chat rooms, online reviews, things like that, of people who are, so anti-whatever, anti-change, anti-this, that, or the other thing, that they treat things like a betrayal. I remember, and I've talked about this at length, the way people talked about X-Men Origins Wolverine and Spider-Man 3 when it came out, the way they still talk about those movies, you would think the directors all took turns coming home and beating up your parents in front of you, or pouring sugar in your gas tank. They made a movie, they made choices that didn't work. You don't have to like it, but I mean, seriously, there's a line, and I acknowledge that I am a huge part of this problem. I get very mad about certain things. I've tried to tone it down as I've gotten older. But there are things movies that are so bad I get personally offended, but I don't think I'm as bad as other people, I don't like the DC Cinematic Universe movies, but they don't, I've never, gotten foamed to the mouth by them, and I think that is an excellent parallel with the original Scream, which was talking about something that was a big talking point then in the late 90s, the whole thing's about, we see violence and therefore we're desensitized to it. And, that was a big discussion back then, where if you see all this, or you suddenly you see all these horror movies, or you play Mortal Kombat, and suddenly you're going to want to go out and kill people. So that was a big discussion then, and toxic fandom is a big discussion now. So I think that's a nice parallel and a good example of a modern update of that Scream trope, the commentary on film culture and film as a whole. So, okay, so point in that favor. Point there. Okay, very good. The murder mystery aspect. I think the murder mystery was fairly well done. In that I kept wondering throughout the film who the killer was. I try not to solve murders when I go and see murder mystery movies. I find I'm so busy trying to do that I don't enjoy the film. But that's something the first Scream did for me, is it made me want to go, well, who's the killer? So I think it did a good job of throwing you off the trail. But I think when we get right down to it, when we find out who it is a touch predictable when you look at it in retrospect. So I will say that. So I think it was fairly good in the moment. I think it's probably one of the better reveals, or one of the better mysteries, at least, of the sequels. I don't know if the surprise ending is as good as the original, but it's okay. So I think the murder mystery gets a decent rating, but not the best. So the subversion of horror movie tropes. Now this one, it does fairly well, especially knowing that not only do horror movies have their own tropes, but that the Scream movies now are an established franchise, 5th in the series, and they are kind of their own genres, just like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween. They are right up there. So in terms of that, they have some fun with. They know the stuff that they're known for, and they subvert it. For instance, a couple of quick. These are not spoilers, so I don't feel bad about sharing them. For instance, one of the big things with Ghostface is his tendency to appear behind a door when it's closed. You go watch the films, and that's one of their favorite jump scares. Someone opens the door and they get something, they close it, and Ghostface is there. They play with that one quite a bit. There's a whole sequence in this where a character's going through opening doors, and the music does the Jaws thing where it swells, and they close the door and nothing's there, and you're like, oh, well, and they do that 3 or 4 times. So, all right, they know their own tropes. The big trope, one of the big things that the Scream movies are known for, the opening kill. Well, this time the person isn't killed; they survive and remain a character throughout the entirety of the film. So, okay, so there you go. I don't know. I will say, again, I'm not going to mention names, but a legacy character does die in this one. They finally kill off one of the main three from the franchise. And I'm not sure if it's as shocking as one would hope, because that is something that a lot of these films do, kill off a main character. You know, Han Solo in The Force Awakens. Yeah, so, I mean, it's not as big a shock, but I think they did they played with that cliche of their own franchise and said, well, we gotta up the stakes here. We gotta Game of Thrones it a little bit. If you start to know who's gonna survive, it begins to become predictable. So on that, I give it a decent rating. I think it worked fairly well. So that's kind of what makes it a decent Scream movie, but, you know, let's talk about some of the intangibles here. The young cast is decent enough. I don't feel like some of the characters were as interesting. I'm not going to say that the characters from the first one were fleshed out, but they at least had very distinct personalities, and I don't think we spent enough time with all of them to really get their distinct personalities. I see that they could have developed them, but they're working with a little bit bigger group, and they each kind of fit a stock type for not only the horror film, but the Scream movies. So they're okay. I think our main actor, again, I don't know the actors' names, but I'll call her by the character, Samantha. She did a great job. She, you could see her as a spiritual successor to Neve Campbell. It's great to see Neve Campbell back. I really dig Neve Campbell. I always thought she was a very good actor, and always a little sorry she didn't catch on more than she did. But looks like she's living a pretty good life, so I guess, you know, if she's not sorry about it, I don't know why I should be. So, it's great to see Neve Campbell back, but the actor playing Sam did a great job. Jack Quaid of The Boys fame, and the son of Dennis Quaid. I think he almost steals the show a bit. He's really good, and I think from what I have seen of The Boys, I'm not a big fan of it, but I liked him in it. I liked his character arc. I think this guy's gonna be something in Hollywood. I think he's got a nice future ahead of him. But then again, not to jinx you, Jackie boy, but that is what we said about everybody involved with the Scream movies. All those young actors were all supposed to be much bigger stars than any of them actually turned out to be. Of course, I guess we still know all of them. We still, you know, people recognize Skeet Ulrich and Rose McGowan and, you know, Matthew Lillard. They didn't do as much as we were kind of thinking they were going to, but they each made their mark in their own way. So I guess I'm being a little harsh. I will say, oh God, this is one thing this is a Scream cliche that I wish they would have ditched. But we start out when we meet a couple of our legacy characters, Dewey and Gale. They've broken up again. They're on the rocks again. Oh, motherfucker! Every fucking time, every one of these goddamn movies. I assume, again, I remember nothing about Scream 4. I know they're both in it, but I don't remember if they were still a couple in that one. But Jesus, you know. Oh God! That I saw and went, But I do have to give big ups to David Arquette. He did a great job in this. I also got to give him and Courtney Cox a lot of credit. They still seem to have a very functional relationship despite a divorce, which I have a great deal of respect for. You know, they seem to be very functional as people together. So good on them. They still work very well together. So yay them. I'll say that, kind of like I said for Spider-Man No Way Home, I think this is probably the best Scream movie since the first one. But here's the problem. It's not such a problem, but when people say that, the thing we have to understand is that you needed all of those in-between films in order to get to this point. It's kind of like saying Rocky Balboa is the best Rocky movie since the original. And that's very true. But you need all of the subsequent sequels in there in order to track the journey. So this is not me trying to write off the other sequels. I think the Scream franchise, and again, I'm hoping to do a retrospective of it this Halloween. I believe that the Scream franchise is what a lot of horror movie franchises is. It has one truly great, truly genre and culture redefining masterpiece. And you'll say what you will about the first Scream, and I badmouthed it a bunch myself. But it was a good movie, and it changed a lot. It did a lot of good things. It did some bad things, but it did a lot of good things. So I applaud it for that. And the other sequels are fine. They're popcorn films. They're good enough for like a spooky movie marathon night. And this one, I think, does what Rocky Balboa did. It does what No Way Home did. It did what I feel Afterlife did. And it kind of raised the franchise back up, so you have these two pillars on either side that, you know, kind of bookend everything. So I think this was a pretty good movie. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed a lot of the references that were popped in there that I don't think a lot of other people in the audience got. For instance, there is a scene where one of our characters is in the hospital and she's watching TV, and she's watching Dawson's Creek, which was a direct descendant of the Scream franchise because it was created by the guy who wrote the original Scream, Kevin Williamson. And if you watch Dawson's Creek and you watch Scream, you see a lot of similarities in the dialogue, in the self-referential humor, the commentaries on media, you know, the slightly pompous 90s we're so smart affectations. You know, there's a lot of Dawson's Creek in Scream. There's a lot of Scream in Dawson's Creek. So it was neat to kind of get that, and also a nice nod to the writer of the original. So there were a lot of those. There were a couple others, and I can't think of them now, but there were one or two other moments that I caught, and I believe they were supposed to be references to earlier films, but I could be wrong. They may have just been coincidences that I went, ha! I will say one thing they have not changed. Ghostface remains the fucking Gerald Ford of movie slashers. And I guess, you know, if you're running around in this costume and that mask, it's got to be hard to see, but man, this fucking guy falls all over the place. Like, I guess they do that to show that there is a human under there. He's not Jason. He's not Freddy. There is a person under it all. So to show that you can beat him and he can be hurt. You know, that's why. But I remember in some of those Scream films, he was falling all over the place. I remember that Scary Movie parody where they do it. He's like, oh, I gotta quit drinking. Yeah, like, yeah, that's this. So he's not as bad as he was in past ones, but he's still kind of a klutz. So it's good to know some things never change. But all in all, I enjoyed this one. I think it. I don't know if I want to start using the term requels, but it's apt. You know, these requels are hit and miss, like everything, I guess. It all comes down to if you walk that tightrope between paying homage to the original and respecting the original, but also adding enough new and fresh ideas to make it entertaining and not just feel like you're retreading the exact same steps, that you're actually doing something new or at least something different. This movie did it. Matrix did not. So I think this one is a pretty good film. I'll include it in a Scream marathon. So yeah. So first movie of 2022 reviewed, and I always say it sets the tone for the year. Of course, I said that about I think it was the first movie I saw in 2020, and, you know, well, we all know how that went. But anyway, so let's wrap this up. So final grade for Scream 2022, I'm giving it a B+. I'm giving it a B+. It was enjoyable. It's fun. I think it pays tribute to the original. You can enjoy it if you're a fan of the original, but it's also fresh enough that I think a new audience may enjoy it. I worry, however, that if this is a success, I don't know how to keep track of these things anymore, that it will spawn more sequels, and I think it's tired, guys. It's time to shut it down. It really is. Thank you, Scream. Thank you for teaching us to laugh at love again, but I think it's time to let you go. My opinion, that's all. So, but not a bad way to start out the new year. Not a bad way to start the new year. So, we have one last film I'm going to be checking out today to get caught up on 2022, so hopefully the rest of the year goes smoothly. Thank you for riding along with us. Top 10 lists coming for 2021. A lot of fun stuff going on with Drive Home Reviews. It's a new year. It's a new day. Let's make it great. So, thank you very much. And as always, drive safe. And I will see you at the movies.